Carrie Sheffield is a familiar face on Fox, CNN, and MSNBC, a Harvard-educated and award-winning journalist and a former White House correspondent. She joins us now to talk about her powerful new memoir, Motorhome Prophecies, a journey of forgiveness and healing. Welcome to 100 Huntley Street, Carrie.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Well, Carrie, your book, Motorhome Prophecies, shares your deeply personal story of intergenerational trauma, heartache, but also healing and forgiveness. Now, you were raised as one of 8 siblings by a father who had significant untreated mental illness, and he believed he was a modern-day prophet. Can you tell us a bit more about your father's issues and how they shaped your early years?
Yes. So unfortunately, my father claims he's now about to be 86 and he has really bad Alzheimer's. So I do pray for his health, but he is fast slipping. But growing up, he was very adamant that he was a prophet who would become president of the United States someday. He formed essentially his own offshoot Mormon cult. He eventually was excommunicated from the official Mormon church, but as he was doing these things without the authority of the official Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he made us, hence the title, Motorhome Prophecies, he made all 10 of us live in a motorhome together. And we lived in not only motorhomes, sometimes we did have houses, but we also lived in sheds and tents. My mother gave birth when our family was living in a tent. I took my exam to go to college when our family was living in a shed with no running water down in the Ozarks in Missouri. And there was a lot of, and I'm very clear when I talk about these living circumstances that it's not about poverty. Some of the most spiritually rich and happiest people are the most poor, but it was about the treatment and about the psychological and spiritual abuse that my father would tell us every morning. He would indoctrinate us, and in the evenings to tell us how unworthy we were, how righteous he was, and how essentially our whole existence was to do what he wanted us to do. And eventually, 2 of my brothers developed schizophrenia. One of them tried to rape me when I was 17, and the other accused me of trying to seduce him to have sex. And my father said I dressed like a, and I encouraged him, just speaking really evil things over me and taking the side of my brother who was on antipsychotic medicine and I was not. And so eventually I said, I don't feel safe here and I want to go away to college. And I'm 5th in the birth order, but I was the first to say I want to leave. And so he raised his hand to the square, making an oath. And he said, I prophesy in the name of Jesus, with his hand to the square. You know, I'm like, he's making an oath. He said, I prophesy in the name of Jesus, you'll be raped and murdered if you go to college, if you leave the cult, essentially. And so, as you might imagine, eventually I did not really think kindly on the name of Jesus because I thought either this Jesus fellow didn't exist and was just a figment of mythology, or he was proactively evil and trying to hurt my life. And so I was in a very angry place for a long time.
Carrie, it's so hard to hear even those experiences of homelessness, neglect, and poverty that you experienced as a young girl, and what your father said over you, inciting the name of Jesus. It breaks my heart. And you know, you mentioned your views of Jesus. What did your views of God become as a result of what your father had been like towards you, what he had done in the name of God, in the name of religion?
I spent about 12 years as an agnostic. And I call that a fence sitter, your cosmic fence sitter. I wasn't pronouncing that I was atheist, that there definitely was no God, but I also was not about to say there was a God. And I basically said, if there is a God, either he is indifferent toward me or he's proactively evil and trying to sabotage me and hates me. And so I hate him back. So that's where I existed, in this place of anger, also toward people of faith. I mean, there were good actions and good behaviors that I saw by some people of faith, you know, humanitarian work, natural disaster relief, helping with hospitals and schools. So I appreciated all of those things, but I didn't think that you needed God to do good things. I used to say that with enough good policies and enough good economic understanding and a good scientific achievement, that we could work that God bug out. That's what I used to say, you know, like a cell phone. You've got your cell phone with, you know, enough 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 versions, you get enough bugs worked out of your phone. I thought I was happy that America and the world, you know, the Western world was secularizing. I thought we could eventually get that God bug worked out of our phone, worked out of our society, because I thought that religion was evil and a man-made construct to program people to be destructive.
And that makes a lot of sense given your experiences with your father, who was doing very abusive things in the name of God, in his opinion. And of course, there's such a spiritual abuse dimension to what you went through with your father. And there's no doubt that that rippled in many ways, probably emotionally and mentally. What were some of the mental health challenges you experienced throughout your younger years?
It was interesting because a lot of the mental health problems manifested the older I got, the older with, puberty hitting, and then with my siblings. Because when you're a child, you don't really understand what's happening, but the older you get, and that's also when your emotions get more complicated, you've got the hormones. And so that's actually when things get worse. And I present studies in the book about child abuse and how, and I try to be as compassionate to my father as well, because he had suffered a childhood rape or sexual assault of some kind by a trusted Mormon female babysitter when he was a boy. And the studies show that childhood trauma, sexual trauma, and other traumas, physical, emotional, if it's not resolved, it actually compounds. So the phrase that time heals all wounds is not true in the case of unresolved childhood trauma. You're actually more likely, it becomes with time, to want to commit suicide. And so my father said he was suicidal because of this sexual assault. And in my siblings' case, unfortunately, 3 of my siblings have attempted suicide. I considered suicide numerous times. Again, like I said, I have 2 brothers who developed schizophrenia, even though nobody else in my large hundreds of cousins, Mormon family, have schizophrenia, and yet we have 2 in our family. So yes, there is a genetic component. There's evidence for that for mental illness, but at the same time, if you have a loving and stable and supportive environment, it absolutely can be managed and prevented.
And, Carrie, what I'm amazed about in your story in particular is, you did go to college, even though your father said all those horrific things over you. And you went on to get a full scholarship to Harvard. And then you started to have so much public success, I'm sure, while you were continuing to struggle with the impact of your upbringing and mental health challenges as a result. Tell me a little bit more about the season in your life where you were really convinced that, as you said, you could get the God bug out of society and change the world through politics.
It's interesting with the book. I know in professional success and professional life, we're really focused on our resumes or the CV. I call this book my anti-resume or my anti-CV, all of those things that I was hiding and the shame. And because I was hiding so much and had so much shame that was trapped and unforgiveness trapped in my body, it just built up so much pressure that I ended up in the hospital 7 times in 2019. And in 2020, that was when I was like, I need to forgive my father. I need to, I can't have this kill me. Like they say, unforgiveness is drinking the poison yourself and expecting the other person to die. I was just spiritually drowning in unforgiveness. I tried everything else in terms of looking for God in all the wrong places. I was worshiping the created instead of the creator, and it just kept failing me. And so eventually I was humbled enough through my circumstances, really decimated, to be able to forgive my father and to find that understanding that I still don't understand why the world the way it is. I don't understand childhood rape. I don't understand malaria. I don't understand the crushing, murderous political regimes we see. I don't understand why this is allowed to happen. But all I know is that the more anger that I feel trapped inside toward God and toward the world, then the worse my life is. There's so much scientific evidence that going to church, doing religious practice, praying, meditation is so good for suicide prevention. I literally rewired my brain so that I would not have these negative cognitive patterns. I believe with my book, God, for whatever reason, allowed my circumstances that I've suffered a lot of this depression and anxiety decades before, so that I can use this to be able to share the healing power of God and the healing power of forgiveness right now at this time.
When you think about yourself prior to forgiving your father, and you think about your view of God, how has your view of yourself and your relationship with God changed since you forgave your father?
I had to both forgive God and my earthly father. And once I did that, it frees me from this burden of being hostile toward my entire existence, that I don't want to kill myself. I don't hate myself. I don't, it seems like such basic things. But my framing changed. So in the Bible, Jesus says, who among you, if your son will ask for bread and you give him a stone, if he asks for, if he asks for a fish and you give him a serpent? Well, I felt like my father gave me lots of serpents and lots of stones. And unforgiveness is going out and buying yourself baskets of stones and baskets of serpents. And once I forgave him, I was able to go on that path to do less self-sabotage and less stones and less serpents in my life.
Carrie, those are such wise words, and they are so hard won. I'm so thankful for your story that you've shared here in Motorhome Prophecies and for your heart and care for others. Carrie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your work in spreading the love of God.